What the hell are we listening to? Hey, Uncle Roddus back again. Yeah, it's been a vinyl drought for 3 months. 3 months with no vinyl. It's been hard. It's been very hard, and I've got through it. I've survived it. No, work has been. It's been a very slow start to the year work-wise, and I have had no extra funds for splashing out on things like vinyl and going to gigs and stuff like that, so it's been pretty quiet on that scene. So yep, this is the first video I've done for a while, but I have had a big splurge now, as I have just been down to Dunedin for a trip to the biannual Lines of Flight, and long-time viewers may recall that back in 2017 I went to the same festival for the first time. And although I didn't pick up any records directly from the festival, this time I have. In the 2 years between the festivals, I actually have picked up a lot of music related to this festival or the scene that's in New Zealand. So the Lines of Flight is a very underground festival of noisy, droney, experimental, soundscapey, weirdo shit like that. I remember saying in my blog report of the last one, I haven't done a blog for this one yet, but that there came in a comment, no actual music was played across the weekend. Well, that's not entirely true. There were beats, there was rhythm, kind of. There were drummers, yeah, but no, fantastic weekend, a really great weekend, and work became right just in time for me to get some funds together to pay for the trip and accommodation, food and records. Turns out that this year there was quite a lot of vinyl available at the festival itself, and that was bloody good, because we were expecting some records to be there that we were really struggling to find anywhere else. Not really going to turn up in the shops, but I'll get to that soon. So unfortunately, a bit of a downside. Everybody in the world will know now that we had a massive shooting here in Canterbury the week before the festival. It was a disgusting display of hatred by a piece of sputum of the white race. Makes you ashamed, makes me feel ashamed to be a white person sometimes, that there are scum of the earth that will do this for their own manifesto, their own publicity, their own infamy. Yeah, it was a disgusting scene. Unfortunately, 50 people are dead due to this fuckwit. Complete and utter fuckwit. There was there was silence before the first gig on the first first artist on Thursday night. Yeah, the festival runs 4 days pretty much. Thursday, Friday night sessions and 2 sessions on Saturday. Anyway, let's get into the records. So I did have a look at a couple of places on the way to Dunedin on Thursday, but the pickings were pretty much slim. I obviously had a budget, because funds still aren't plentiful to be spending bigger money, but I did spend a lot more than I intended. I met up with James Buttery. Many of you will know James. Many people in the community know James, in the YouTube vinyl community know James. He makes plenty of videos, and he was there. I have met James briefly before last year when I was up in Wellington, and got to spend a lot of time with him this weekend, so that was really great. And there were actually 3 of us at the festival who are video makers on YouTube vinyl community. There was myself, James, and Chris Walker. Chris, I have mentioned many times in my video, is a huge influence on me and what I collect, because he is a huge New Zealand music fan with a huge knowledge of New Zealand music, especially on vinyl. And he does a podcast which I have mentioned many times, and it was really cool to catch up with Chris again. So James and I got together on Friday after the Thursday night gig and met up for coffee in the morning and went shopping as you do. Now James had already been the day before, and so he wasn't going to be buying a hell of a lot because he had already been the day before and seen a couple of the two main shops that we were going to. I didn't go to Disden this time. Completely forgot about it, to be honest, and the pickings there aren't usually too great anyway. So after our coffee, we popped next door to a little shop that has a couple of bins, 3 or 4 bins, but there wasn't a lot pickings there this time. So we went round to Relics, and Relics has just unbelievable heaps of great New Zealand music, and I had a massive pile, and I was looking at them and I going, fuck. And I had to put most of them back, and I narrowed it down to 2 records that I wasn't going to leave behind, and the first one is this. Lewis likes his daily dip, and this is Chris Knox's Tall Dwarfs. This is from 1980 something. On Flying Nun. This is the second to last EP I need to find of the Flying Nun EPs that were released between 1981 and 1987. The last one is latest one was Dogma. There were 2 singles I think released as well that I see on Discogs, and then a bunch of albums. I have one of the albums, so I wasn't leaving that on the shelf. So that was in the new bins after I put back a whole lot of stuff. And then there's this one here, a reissue from Bill Doreen and the Builders. Is it credited to Bill Doreen? Doesn't say. Bill Doreen went under many names or variations on a theme of the Builders. Yeah, the Builders and Bill Doreen, it says on that piece of paper. Piano High 30s. Unwunked, I think. I really don't know how to say that. They're a label that put out a whole bunch of Bill Doreen and other very obscure New Zealand stuff. These are actually EPs of a sort, and it was an expanded EP. There is half a dozen or so tracks on there, based around an original 7-inch. Now, still in Relics, and James had been down the back of the shop looking at the cheapie bins, and I went down after I had sort of basically settled on those 2 records. I went down the back to see James, and we sort of spotted on the floor about half a dozen or 8 or 9 crates of records sitting on the floor, and there was a sign on the wall above them saying these records have not been priced or sorted as yet. Please feel free to browse and bring them up to the counter for pricing. So I thought, well, let's have a look, and I'm glad I did. Found this one, the Economic Wizards, The Second Coming. Now, I don't know anything about the Economic Wizards or The Second Coming. It is an EP. The reason I bought it was on L-Man Records, and I picked up another L-Man Records, and had looked up there. I've never heard of them before, but they're a New Zealand label from the 80s, and I picked it up. A jazz record they put up a wee while back that I found in Penny Lane, so I was keen to check out the rest of their discography if I see it, and I was quite surprised to see this. I haven't even listened to that one yet. And so that was L-Man 009, and then lo and behold, as I kept going through the bins, I found this one. Now, I knew what this was, the Pelicans. Quite familiar with the first track. This is also an EP, but it's got 6 tracks. L-Man 004. Yep, I haven't played that one yet, but I do know the first track on it. And then was really pleased to find this one as well, L-Man 002. So it actually came out before the EP there, but this is the only album, I believe, that the Pelicans put out. Banana Dominion is a song that I was familiar with from back in the day, plus I have it on a compilation. Overall, this is it's very, very well recorded, great sound quality. These weren't hugely expensive. Chris was actually, when I put this up on Facebook, I had seen him the night before, and we'd been chatting about some records that we were going to be chasing up at the festival. He saw this and goes, "Where the hell did you see that? I did not see that in the shop. I've been looking for that for several years." He unfortunately for him, unfortunately for me, he missed it, so I managed to get my hands on it. Yeah, because he didn't look in those particular bins. So that was, one more New Zealand out of those bins, New Zealand record. This one here, Big Norm, an audio documentary of the greatest years of one of New Zealand's greatest men. Yes, Norman Kirk was Prime Minister of New Zealand in the early 70s. I think he was elected around 1972. He unfortunately died in office, but he was probably one of the very more popular leaders of our country at the time, or certainly in him, my memory of him, of course, is not very good because I was probably only about 6 or 7 years old when he passed. But there's a great song on here called Big Norm, which by a band called Ebony, which was all the rage and on the radio back in the day, and especially after he died, I remember that. But most of this is political commentary of some sort. But it is a collectible record around New Zealand, but it's not expensive. Now, in the same bins I found this one, Anthony Braxton, 7 Standards, 1985 Volume 2. I didn't actually realise it was just a standards record. I didn't even look that closely at it. I basically just grabbed it because I do not see Anthony Braxton records around in the South Island, in the wild at all. Very, very rarely. And I'm not a huge collector of his music, but if I see them, I grab them. And it wasn't expensive. Turns out that it's actually bloody good. It's sort of, it's very 80s, but it's actually Coltrane, Monk, Gillespie, John Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Horace Silver and Miles Davis tracks on here, and I had to listen to it. I did quite enjoy it. It's really good. And finally, from those bins, I picked out this one. This is a double LP compilation of music from Soweto in the 1980s. The band that would probably be most well known would be Johnny Clegg and Savuka. To be honest, I had listened to the first LP of this, and it was really disappointing. It's very, very polished 80s sound. It's that commercial sort of South African sound. I would say with Johnny Clegg on it, that would probably give you an idea of what it is. And I sort of got excited about it, but unfortunately it was a bit of a letdown. It's not the really jazzy more side of it that I've listened. I've got 3 Soweto compilations on CD that I really like, and another one on vinyl called Sound of Thunder or whatever that. No, it wasn't called that. Something. Anyway, I was showing it before many years ago, that's a good compilation. But that one there, I'm not sure on that one. Okay, James and I shot out to South Dunedin to have a look at Zodiac, and I managed to find this. This is on my want list, on my Discogs want list. Really pleased to find it. Jean-Paul Sartre Experience, The Size of Food. I think this was their second album, or they had an EP out, and then this album. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll have to look that up because I haven't done that kind of research on this. But yeah, these are a Christchurch band. I actually remembered. I'm pretty sure I saw these guys live back in the late 80s, early 90s, supporting the Violent Femmes, who played here a couple of 3 times back in the day, along with the Bats, I think, in that concert. Anyway, that was it. So that's cool. Really pleased to have that. That's a really lovelily well recorded, great detail record. Nice, quirky music. I really enjoyed that. So the rest of the records I picked up at the festival. Now, I'd spoken to Chris Walker on the Thursday night. Now, there was a couple of records that had come up on Facebook and Bandcamp and etc. that I knew were coming out, and I could possibly get them through Bandcamp. I knew one of them I could get from Bandcamp, but it was coming from the States. I was like, no, I'm not paying $31 postage to get the fucking thing here. But I knew the guy that was in the band, or the band itself, was playing in the Lines of Flight Festival. So I was hoping to get my hands on a copy, and Chris was in the same boat. There was also another LP which I'd seen come up, and Chris said the guy, he'd bought a copy of it off the guy from the band, and he said the guy, I didn't know, but he said the guy lives in Dunedin, so that was cool. So I was going to try and get my hands on a copy of that, and fortunately I did, because the guy turned up at the festival. And then on Thursday night, Chris had mentioned a couple of records that he was after, and he had spoken to a or he had contact with a guy, and I don't know whether he's spoken to them that night or not, or beforehand, that he knew was in some bands and he knew was playing as part of another band, and he was after some records from that fella, and this is actually one of them, the Futurians, and I have 2 other LPs from the Futurians, and this is their second to latest one of recordings from 2003 and 2006. The man is Clayton Noon, and there are also 3 or 4 other people on this record. And Pat Krause plays on this. Yeah. So, wow, this is really, really lo-fi, as is all their records. The last one I got, which I showed not that long ago before Christmas, I actually quite enjoyed it. It came out on Feeding Tube Records last year, and I picked a copy up later on in the year from somewhere, I can't remember now. And so that was cool. So if I had listened to one side of this so far, it's very lo-fi. Sounded pretty cool though. And the other record that I just mentioned that I was keen to get my hands on was this one. And again, I'd seen it come up, and I think Chris had posted it on his Facebook, Counting the Beat Facebook page. So I know the Sandos Lab Technicians. I have one of their records. There's only another one, I think, available on vinyl. They do have a reasonable discography. Anyway, I managed to, Chris introduced me to Tim, one of the band members who had the copies of this. There was a copy of this in relics, but they wanted a lot more than what I paid for it. So I knew that I'd probably get it cheaper if I could get it off the guy himself. So that was cool. So I did pick this up. Really pleased with it. It's very lo-fi, but it's pretty interesting music. And actually my description when I posted it up on the Valon's page on Facebook was I was having an acid nightmare where Sun Ra met Eneko Morricone, and this is kind of like a soundtrack to an imaginary spaghetti western. Yeah, it's really good, and I'm really enjoying it. So also on Friday night, Chris had mentioned to me about, along with the Futurians record, which I figured I would buy because I had their other stuff, another record, and he was talking about it, and he said, look, he said it's a droney record. There's just 20 minutes of drone either side of it. He said it sounds almost like they just put the guitar up against the amplifier and walked away. Well, I kind of was thinking, if there's not a lot of variation, maybe it's not something I might be into. Anyway, there was quite a few records on the table finally at Lines of Flight. A lot of them I already had, but I spotted this one, and I thought, oh, okay, that looks pretty cool, I'll grab it. And it wasn't until I had it in my hand and Chris was just coming in back in the door from outside, and he goes, oh, where'd you get that? I said, oh, it was on the table. On the table, there's another one. I said, oh, is this the one you were talking about? And he said, yes, it is. So this is CJO, Sido Not Dead. As you can hear, this is what's playing in the background. Ruby, would you shut up? Basically, yeah, 20 odd plus minutes of what you can hear in the background without a lot of variation, but I actually really liked it, so I'm really glad I brought it. So again, Clayton Noon, CJA. He is actually a member of Armpit, who is a band I showed a very lo-fi record that I picked up last year. Very sort of low budget, no label release pretty much, recorded in '93, originally on Plop Recordings as a C60. This actually sounds really good, and it's actually reasonable sound quality. So one of the musicians that was playing at this festival was the legendary Bruce Russell, and he played at the last one too. And Bruce, for people who are really into underground noise, free noise, whatever you want to call it, will know Bruce Russell as probably the founding member of the Dead Sea from New Zealand. When I arrived at Port Chalmers on Friday, for the first session on Friday evening, Bruce was standing outside talking to a couple other guys, musicians outside. I got there reasonably early-ish, so I went straight up to Bruce and I said, I want to get hold of a handful of Dusts, Bruce, because I understand that you may actually have some copies here, or I am hoping like hell you have some copies. And he said, yes, I do. And he also has had some copies of it turned out he also had some copies of another record I was very keen to get my hands on because it had sold out in the shops and it was a very limited edition. So, and Chris was also very keen to get his hands on the Handful of Dust. But first of all, we did finally get our hands on them later in the evening. Delaney Davidson is someone who I've shown a lot of records of, and I've seen him play a couple of 3 times and spoken to him, and he was talking about, well, I actually saw Delaney and Bruce Russell play last year, and I spoke to them, and Delaney was saying about this record's coming out, as well as some others. Anyway, so this is on Island Press Records. Island Press do very, very limited runs of records in Christchurch, unfortunately mostly on lathe cut, and I won't touch lathe cuts because they're just rubbish quality. But this one is on, well, it is a lathe cut direct to vinyl, I understand. Edition of 200, I have number 163, and this is, I think side 2 is a 20-minute piece, which is recorded live at Christchurch Art Gallery, which I think is kind of like a little bit like what they did last year when I saw them, but I haven't had a decent listen to that. But side 1's 6 shorter tracks, and yeah, really good, and really, really impressed. But yeah, the one that was really, 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 really wanting to get hands on was this, A Handful of Dust. So Bruce is in A Handful of Dust, and they played, and they were probably one of the best acts of the weekend. I mean, they've been around for 25 plus years. Their earliest recording, so what? So this is Dragging Her Wings of Rusty Knives, selected recordings from 1994 to 2016. 2016 recording being the latest studio recordings, but most of these are live and unreleased. So it's a double album, lovely packaging, on thin wrist recordings out of the States, I believe. So it has this kind of little envelope type thing here with a couple of LPs inside and a little booklet with some notes from Bruce. Yeah, 4 side tracks, 4 fairly long tracks on each LP. Mostly recorded live, but I think, yeah, like I said, there was a studio track on one of them. I've only listened to the first record, but it is awesome. It is actually way beyond my expectations of the quality. Yeah, compiled by Bruce Russell, Alistair Galbraith. Yeah, really cool. This is a great package. Very, I mean, you can buy it off Bandcamp, but for us, we had to get it shipped all the way from America. So you can get it on Bandcamp if you want to get hold of this, because it's going to be pretty limited, I would imagine. But it's bloody great. Yeah, there's not a lot of vinyl around for these guys. There is, they have released a few things over the years, but mostly CDs. I think there may be 1 or 2 pieces of vinyl. One I have, their very first recording. So that's absolutely wrecked, and it has far exceeded my expectations as to what the music is like. The other, so that was a great haul from the festival. Really pleased. Finally, on the way home, I managed to find this at a little junk shop in Mayfield. I usually stop at the Mayfield junk shop to pick these up. Pick up anything that's there. I've managed to score like 3 records over the years. Most of it's rubbish, but this is a New Zealand Composer edition. This is from 1983. Larry Pruden, he died in 1982. So this was kind of put together, I think, as a tribute to him. Chris was really interested when I showed this to him on Facebook, or I texted him a picture of it, and especially because it's got New Zealand names on the pieces that he wrote, particularly Taranaki, Akarara, and Haast Highway. And the Taranaki piece and the Haast Highway pieces, they're really good pieces of music. Haast Highway one is played by a brass band, the Skellerup Woolston band, can you believe? And actually it's quite an interesting piece of music. And the Taranaki piece, New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, that's really good. So yeah, that was a nice little find on $5. So finally I have broken the drought. There's like, 15 albums there and only 1 dud. But all of the ones that I picked up from the festival itself are really great. So the dog is whining like hell to go outside. I need to let her out before she starts ripping the door to pieces. And we'll see you again next time. Happy hunting.